I don't know. I guess we are having issues with technology. Exactly. So I guess we are back on. Um, please, if people are here and you can see me, please comment. Please, if anybody's here and can see me, please drop a comment below that you can. Okay, fantastic. It seems I'll be waiting. Please drop a comment here if you can see me. If you've joined, please do drop a comment so that I know and I can continue with the session. Okay. I hope people can see me, but please, if you can see me and you can hear me, please drop a comment so that I know and we can start. Time is not on our side, and I wouldn't want to take much of our time also. So it seems we are on. I can see one viewer here, and I'll probably just start and hope that people join us as we go along. I will introduce myself, and I will also introduce the platform that has given me the opportunity to be here today to speak. And that platform is the Naija Campus Forum. And the Naija Campus Forum is a platform, is a fast-growing platform that has or set up for students of higher institutions in Nigeria, and by that I mean colleges of education, polytechnics, university students, and the platform has the sole purpose of bringing students together in one body where they can network, learn, and also interact within themselves. So the platform currently has representatives from over 30 institutions, and today we are having the second edition of the Naija Campus Forum online training series. And like I said, I've introduced the platform, and I'll probably introduce the platform again as people join, because I can see 2 viewers here, but notwithstanding, that wouldn't stop us from going along with the training session. So today I'll be speaking on youth radicalization in Nigeria, and I'm sure that many of those who have seen the flyer, please permit me, I might be looking down. I have my jotter here. I listed a couple of things down so that I'll be guided in some of the things I say, and we can enjoy the training session together. And so youth radicalization in Nigeria, I'm sure a lot of people will be looking and be wondering why this topic, why are we talking about this? And definitely there should be a rationale behind the study. So I'll just briefly talk about the rationale behind the study before I actually even go further into the study itself or into the training session itself. The The rationale behind this study, I think from my personal experience of being a graduate student of peace and conflicts and spending time and reading and the rest, and attending seminars, interacting with people, practitioners in that field, I have discovered that the problem of radicalization, the problem of terrorism in Nigeria is one that everybody knows about in one way or the other. The TV stations, the popular TV stations in Nigeria always reel out informations or news gazettes about majority of the problems that the country faces as pertaining to terrorism. And so you find that there's a big problem in the country, but a handful of people only have an in-depth knowledge or an in-depth understanding of what is actually going on. And so a key area where I thought I as an individual, as a member of the society can come in, is to actually do a step down of knowledge to people within my age range or my peer, people who I feel have a huge vulnerability of falling into the problem of terrorism or radicalization in the country. I know majority of us might feel that the problem is one that persists in the northwest and the northeastern part of the country, and we as Southerners or as Yoruba or Igbo or Hausa or whatever tribe we belong to might feel that we do not have or we do not face these challenges. But I categorically can tell you that the youth in Nigeria is at risk of radicalization, and therefore there's a need to actually understand that phenomenon and know how to navigate ourselves as youths, as vulnerable youths, as at-risk youths in such times and in such situations. So that is what has given the idea behind this study today. And just like every other study, I've taken time to actually just outline what we'll be focusing on in this study, because if we're talking of radicalization, it's a very broad area, and we might not be able to fully touch on everything. But what I have done, or what we'll be doing today, is to look at the idea of radicalization itself. Mr. Adewale James, nice to see you too, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. So the idea of radicalization itself, I've talked about the rationale for the study, which is to actually the rationale for the study is to actually deepen the knowledge of the youth on factors and drivers that lead to radicalization for violent extremism. And another thing would be to actually look at government policies and strategy options that we have in Nigeria in place, and to also just deepen the knowledge of the youth on some of these things, so that we are not just ignorant on some of these things. You might be an health practitioner, you might be a business person, you might be whatever, you might be an apprentice somewhere, an artisan, but look, the fact that you have this knowledge does not kill you. So it will just deepen your knowledge on some of the factors and the drivers that lead to radicalization, youth radicalization for violent extremism, and to also explain to us some of the policy options and strategies of government on issues surrounding radicalization, violent extremism, and de-radicalization. And so these are the drivers of the rationale of the study. And another thing we'll be talking about will be to examine the driver and the push and pull factors that are generating at-risk youths for radicalization. Pardon some of these grammatical terms. I will try as much as I can within my ability to break them down and to make them as explainable and as understandable as I can do. So another thing we'll look at is the responses and policy options of violent extremism and radicalization. Then we'll also look at recommendations for some of us that are youths, our peers, people within the age range of probably 15 to 35, 40, on things that we can do to abstain ourselves from being caught in the web of radicalization in Nigeria and whichever part of the world that we even find ourselves. So, straight to the study itself. I would just like to explain what radicalization means. I might not be able to, I wouldn't want to bore you with so much academic I wouldn't want to bore you with plenty academic whatever, but I'll just put it as it is, as I feel the average mind would understand. So the concept of radicalization is one that has generated controversy in different countries of the world and in different international organizations and different bodies. And it is one term that came into limelight following the attack on the September 11 attack, 2001 attack on the Twin Towers and the International Trade Center in the United States of America. But pertaining to Nigeria, the term radicalization came into focus with the advent of the Boko Haram group in 2009. But what is radicalization itself? The Oxford Learner's Dictionary defines radicalization as, permit me if you see that I'm looking down constantly, I have things jotted here that will help us to just smoothen this study over so that we don't bore ourselves with some of the exigencies on the other sides and we can just go straight forward to what we actually need to learn. So the Oxford Learner's Dictionary defines radicalization as the act or process of making somebody more extreme or radical in their opinions on political or social issues. Another definition I will also give is radicalization is a process of adopting, promoting, changing, or strengthening ideas that reject mainstream ideas or approaches. So you can simply say that radicalization is, or a radical ideology is one that goes against mainstream approaches to political or social understanding of life. So once you find an ideology that seems to be at alternate positions to that which has been in the customary life of a group of people for a number of years, and you find that ideology to be extreme in some way, to be radical in some way, that is an ideology that leads to radicalization. So I will also define what we term as violent extremism. You see, some of these definitions are sometimes, how do I put it now, are sometimes imported for Africa and might not necessarily show what we are going through in Africa. But this is some of the definitions that have been used world over and even in Nigeria and some African countries to actually define some of these phenomena and terminologies. So please just bear with me as I read some of them out. So violent extremism is defined as a conviction that privileges violence more than dialogue in the pursuit for personal and collective aspiration. So when you find a situation whereby violence is preferred to dialogue in pursuing a personal or a collective ambition, in the sense that, okay, you find groups that feel that their needs, their wants, their interests, their desires are not being met, and rather than dialogue or go through political means of attaining some of these interests, these needs, they prefer to go through violent means, then you can also term that as violent extremism. So the third key concept we'll be using in this study today would be at-risk youth. And at-risk youth are people whose socio-economic and political status makes them vulnerable to being influenced into joining or legitimizing violence for achieving their aspirations. So at-risk youths are youths. I can generalize and say that a Nigerian youth is a youth at risk, because you find a Nigerian youth to be social and to have a weakened socio-economic and political status, and we are naturally being vulnerable in several ways. So an at-risk youth is one that has everything against them, and then it now influences them to picking up violence or legitimizing violence to achieving their aspirations and their aims. So in short, what I've done in the last few minutes is to just give us a breakdown of the rationale behind this study. Apart from that, to give us a kind of a conceptual definitions for some of the terms that we'll use interchangeably or within the study itself. And so I think the major thing that I will be talking about next is the drivers to radicalization in Nigeria, because this is our country and it majorly is our focus in whatever we do as youths currently. So I will start with the push and pull factors for radicalization, and I will just mention some of them and try and explain some of these things. And I know that some of us here would understand some of the things I'm saying based on our knowledge of reading in the papers or watching the TV or actually even seeing some kinds of films. There are some genres of films that if you watch, you might have a bit of an understanding on things related to terrorism and jihadism and a couple others. So push and pull factors of radicalization of youth, of at-risk youth. So number one that I will talk about is pious ambitions or pious aspirations. You find that in several parts of Nigeria today, particularly the north, the northeast, the northwest, where we have the bulk of the security challenge relating to terrorism in Nigeria, you find that from study, and I can tell you categorically that scholars have said that some youths have joined violent extremist groups such as Boko Haram and Saru, ISWAP, and a couple others just because of their pious aspirations. Many just want to genuinely follow a religious, or they genuinely just want to be religious. But in the pursuit of finding a religious teacher or finding somebody that they can call a leader, a religious leader, then they fall into the hands of people we call demagogues and charlatans. These are people who naturally just prey on people's weaknesses and convert those people into radical followers or people that they use to better their own lots for selfish interest. So push factors, you find people who naturally just want to be religious and in the process of being religious fall into the hands of religious demagogues or charlatans. Then another thing is that we have social, political and economic exclusion of the youth. When you have a system of government or a society where the youths are excluded in virtually all parts of that system, you find it generally or naturally those kind of youths will pick up arms against the state. It might not be all the youths, or definitely it might not, it will not, but you will find sections of the youths that would definitely, because of the disadvantaged points that they are in, will pick up arms against the state, and that is one of the push factors that you have for radicalization. So you have social, political and economic exclusion of the youth. Then when you have social, political and economic exclusion, it leads to a desire to be involved in the economic and political relevance of that system. And so you find youths that because of the exclusion that they have gone through want to be included and therefore see violence and violent means as a way of gaining political power. And so when you have such youths, naturally they gravitate towards groups, existing groups that have that same kind of ideology, or you find that they pick up arms, they create their own set of groups and they pick up arms against the state in search for political and economic or socio-political relevance in that environment. So you also have the desires to become heroes and martyrs as one of the major factors pushing youth into radicalization. You know, youths are generally from the age of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, even to the 20s. The average Nigerian youth is very, very impressionable. And you find that because of some of the things and people that they've interacted with in their environment, because of the stories they've heard of people who became martyrs and who became heroes in quotes because they picked up arms against the state. People such as Muhammad Yusuf, the defunct or the dead leader of the Boko Haram group, and several others, Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and a couple others, al-Baghdadi. You find that youth, because of these stories that they've heard of these certain types of people, because of that, you find that they gravitate towards becoming radical individuals, so that they also, because they also want to become heroes and martyrs, and so that people can also speak about them in glowing terms, like they've heard them speak about other people. So because of the impressionable age at which the Nigerian youth is, or the Nigerian youths are, you find that naturally they gravitate towards becoming martyrs and heroes in their society. So another thing that we have is that you find a huge instrumentalization of and politicization of jihadi narratives of jihads that have been politicized for radicalization. So on this point alone, it might take me 2-3 hours to talk, but I'm just going to streamline it and just explain it in brief, because it's a very wide area on its own also. So you find that people use some of the narratives of jihad, some of the narratives that are found in some of the creeds of some of these extants, or what's it called now? Some of these extremist groups, such as Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram itself. Some of the narratives of some of those organizations or some of those bodies have been politicized, have been twisted in a way that it supports jihad, and so it has been instrumentalized in those areas. Messages have been preached to youth, sermons have been delivered to them, they've gotten flyers. So in different formats, those messages have been twisted and they've been preached to several people. So it's been instrumentalized, and the narratives of jihad are drawing people also to radicalization. So the ones I just spoke about now are the push factors, and I will just briefly talk about the pull factors also. The pull factors, you also find the politicization of grievances, in the sense that people genuinely have grievances against the state, or against an entity, or against a state actor, or whatever. People genuinely have grievances. But in sane political climates or in sane countries, there are ways and mechanisms for which those grievances are addressed. And when you don't have mechanisms or structures in place for you to address grievances of the people in the society, you find charlatans and demagogues. Those that I call people that prey on people's or on individuals' grievances or individuals' passions for selfish interests. They now politicize some of these grievances to a position where they can use those individuals that are grief or are grievance with the state or with anybody for their own personal gain. So you now have big men in the society that, because they have money, they are known, they are orators, they are charismatic, they can speak to people and get them moving, they can make people passionate. And so this set of people therefore politicize some of the grievances of a community or a general populace. And I will use the example of the Boko Haram crisis or the Boko Haram group to briefly explain what I am saying. When the Boko Haram group started in 2009, well, that was when it became a violent group. Several people have traced the origin of Boko Haram to as far back as the 1980s, with the Maitasini group and several other groups that formed after that period, the Gumis of this world and several other people. But the group Boko Haram came to existence in the year 2000, 1999-2000, and before that time, or during that period down to 2009, it used to be a group that was used for political means to gain political power in several countries, in several instances or several elections in the states, in Borno State. And it got to a point where the grievances of that group was against the governor of the group, Alimadu Sheriff. of the state. And so the grievances was politicized, and then in fact it was religionized, because it became a thing where the Boko Haram group was talking about the leaders being corrupt, and so eventually he moved from that to being a violent extremist group. It wasn't an extremist group initially. It wasn't a violent extremist group initially. It was just an extremist group, because as at that point in the early days of its creation, it wasn't violent. It was just a religious group that was campaigning in several towns, even to countries, Cameroon, Sudan, and several parts of West Africa and Nigeria itself. So another pull factor is politicization of grievances. Then you have another pull factor as chance to plunder. In the sense that when people are not, or when the youths are not, when you don't even make 1,000 naira in a week, and you find an opportunity for you to go into somebody's house, pick the person's goods, or steal the person's money, or kill the person for whatever, it definitely pulls people into criminal or radical ideologies or radical extremist groups. And so this is another problem too. Then unrestricted access to narcotics and opioids. Look, it's a general problem in the country today. Narcotics, opioids, and I'm sure everybody understands what I'm talking about. You find people who overdose on tramadol and codeine and the rest. In fact, I can reference a BBC documentary that was produced in either 2018 or 2019. The documentary was titled Sweet Sweet Codeine. You can check online on YouTube. And in that documentary, if I'm not mistaken, the documentary cites that in Kano State alone, I think Kano town alone, 2 million bottles of codeine were consumed daily. And so you can imagine the amount of damage it would have done to the mental states of the youth, the physical and the health status of some of these people also. And so unrestricted access to opioids and narcotics is also a very, very, very big pull factor for radicalization. Then we have profitability of violence for socio-economic and political reckoning, and I think I've explained that in bit. So in short, I've been able to speak about the push and the pull factors of radicalization, for radicalization of at-risk youths. But there is something I missed, and I think I will just briefly speak about it. And it's related to the mediums for radicalization. And I think that will be the next thing that I will talk about before I speak about the drivers for radicalization. The mediums of radicalization are generally or broadly categorized into two. And you have offline radicalization and online radicalization. Now, it's just like it sounds. Offline radicalization is one where you necessarily need not have gadgets, phones or laptops or whatever. All you need is an individual that is already radicalized, who has the charisma and who has the knowledge in that line of radical ideology to just radicalize others around them. So you find it in forms of open air sermons, or you find it in form of open air sermons. You find it in forms of flyers. You find it in forms of cassettes and CDs, and some of and then family to family, brother to brother, friend to friend radicalization kind of thing. But since the advent of the Web 2.0 and the social media in the late 90s and the early 2000s, you find that radicalization has moved from being static in the sense that it used to be offline alone to being roaming in the sense that it is now online. Mediums like Twitter, mediums like YouTube, Facebook have been mediums where individuals in this country and in other parts of the world have actively been radicalized on, and they've been used for violent extremist purposes. And you can also find that some of these mediums, apart from a radicalization for an extremist group, you find that individuals have been radicalized on these mediums to act as lone wolf. What we call lone wolf terrorists are people who are not affiliated to any terrorist groups, but because of the radical ideology that has been built or that they've been imbibed in, they carry out lone attacks, probably pick up a gun, go into a church or go into a mosque and kill 50, 30, 40 people in one fell swoop. And so you find cases like the New Zealand Christchurch killings and several other places in America and Canada and other parts of the world. So these are some of the mediums through which people have been radicalized for violence, extremism, or for lone wolf activities. Now, I think the next thing I will talk about is definitely the drivers for radicalization in Nigeria. So, one of the major problems or one of the major drivers for radicalization that we have in Nigeria is clashing narratives of protracted conflicts in several parts of the country. Now, look, when we are talking of radicalization in Nigeria, you find out that majority of the places that this phenomenon is present in is in the north. I can tell you categorically that from studies that I've read and I've also partook in, you find that places like Kano, Kaduna, Katsina, Borno, Adamawa, Yobe, these are some of the most vulnerable states in the country when it comes to radicalization. But at the same time, you have subtle radicalization going on in places like Kogi, Naija, FCT, Jos, Plateau. So these are some of the other places where you find some of these things ongoing. But in the sense that people don't pay attention to these places because most times it is embedded in group conflicts, probably Christian versus Muslim or farmers versus herders. But if you look closely enough, you find that some of these conflicts, intergroup conflicts, are generators of radical ideologies and radicalization in the country. And some of these states that I've mentioned, Kogi for example, Niger for example, Plateau State, for example, even the FCT are places where we've had intergroup conflict in recent times. And you can also mention Benue State. You can also mention Taraba State. These are places where intergroup conflict between Christians and Muslims, or between farmers and herders, or between external bodies and internal bodies have taken place in recent times. And I can tell you that some of these intergroup conflicts are harbingers or are factors or drivers of radicalization in some of those areas and in Nigeria at large. So this is one of the major drivers, clashing narratives of protracted intergroup conflicts. Then we have emergence of community warlords, charlatans, and demagogues. These are people that I've spoken almost twice or three times about demagogues and charlatans. These are people who can single-handedly radicalize a lot of people, sometimes to the tune of hundreds or even thousands, because they have the wherewithal, they have the power, the money, the connections to do so. So another thing we see as one of the drivers is also the inestimable number of young people without sources of livelihood and hope in the country. So this is a recurrent issue, I think, from probably the 80s or the 90s. I think the generation from the 70s enjoyed free education and free and they got jobs on a platter of gold, and even to the 80s. But since the late 80s to this present time, you find a huge number of youths in the country that do not have a source of living. And when you even don't have a source of living and you don't have hope, it's a more terrible thing. Because sometimes when you have hope that, okay, I'm doing the right thing, things will get better, and you are working towards it, it's still a more better situation than when an individual or a youth is jobless, has no source of income, and then is hopeless. It's a very terrible thing. So you have a high number of Nigerian youths that are both jobless and hopeless. And that is why you find that many of these youths or many of these young people in the country have drifted towards illegal means of making money, or fraudulent means of making money, and at the same time, why many of them are driving towards violent extremism, radicalization for violent extremism. Because many of these groups, and I can speak on Boko Haram and ISWAP very, very well, I know that many of these groups pay youths and pay some of the people that they recruit into their groups in dollars and in fact sometimes in euros. So some of them get paid as much as $500 in a month or $600 in a month, or to the tune of almost 700 euros at times in a month. So you can you can imagine the amount that some of these people make in joining these groups and how attractive it will seem. Because when you are even in the system, in the Nigerian system, as a youth, you're probably teaching in a school, you get paid meager amounts. Some get paid 6,000, 7,000, 18,000 naira, and you are expected to still do well, be productive in that kind of an environment. If you are an artisan or whatever, some don't even get paid properly. So you find a group or a set of people that are willing to exploit the fact that Nigerian youths are not employed, do not have meaningful sources of income, or do not have ways to better their lives, and it leads to radicalization for violent extremism. So another problem that we have, or another driver that we have, is the demonization of the religious and the ethnic order. So I think it's common in Nigeria these days to find people speak against Christians, Muslims speak against Christians, Christians speak against Muslims, and there is a demonization of the order. And then you find Igbos countering the Hausas and the Yorubas countering the Hausas, and everybody is always against themselves. Everybody is tribalistic in nature, and religion has taken a huge chunk of our thinking. But I think this major problem has driven a lot of people, because the religions are demonized. Look, if you look at some of the narratives of Boko Haram itself, some of the narratives have generally been in demonizing the Christian religion, and even in demonizing some of the practices of Islam, some people that practice Islam itself in Nigeria. So, and then you find it that even in other intergroup conflict also, you find Christians against Muslims, or some segments of Muslims against Muslims, or some segments of Christians against Christians, and it has caused so much conflict. I can tell you that in southern Kaduna, for example, you find some segment of Christians against Muslims, some segment of Muslims against Muslims, and so these are some of the things, some of the drivers that have the demonization of the religious or the ethnic order. So I think after talking about all of these issues and all of these challenges that the Nigerian youth faces as a result of radicalization, or as a result of being at risk of radicalization, I think one major thing that I also want us to learn, or I also want to open our eyes to, are some of the responses of government and governmental agencies or non-governmental agencies, that is civil society organizations, to some of these problems that we have. And I will start by saying clearly that majority of the response of the government, or the larger chunk of the response of the government, has been kinetic or militaristic in nature. When I say kinetic, it means that it has largely been based on the use of force. The deployment of the armed forces, deployment of the army, deployment of the air force, deployment of the mobile police, and several. And it has always been like that since 2009, about 11 years ago now. It has always been like that. But in the year 2016, before the government of President Muhammadu Buhari came in, the government of President Jonathan, towards the end of his period, tried what we call soft approach to countering violent extremism and de-radicalization. And it was credited to that government to have been the first government to start something like that. Although it failed in a way, because the government couldn't see it through, and the successes recorded were not so much. But it was the first government in Nigeria that tried negotiation and dialogue with some of these extremist groups. And I understand the fact that Nigerians generally might not like the fact that government is negotiating with terrorist groups. But one thing I can tell you specifically is this, and this is my own bias, please. You might quote me anywhere, you might not quote me anywhere. Now, the point I'm trying to make is this: nobody, no one individual, and by individual I also mean government, can mobilize resources in fighting a conflict forever. You can't mobilize resources for 10, 15, 20 years at a stretch. It's not even the United States of American government cannot mobilize resources for 20 years at a stretch or for 10 years at a stretch. So you need to begin to look for mediums or ways by which you can mobilize resources and then use other approaches or other mechanisms to combat the problem you are facing. So I think that is what the Jonathan administration started in 2015, and I think the Buhari administration also continued with it. But I'll just briefly speak about some of the policy options that we have, policy and strategic options that we have for radicalization and countering violent extremism or de-radicalization in Nigeria. And one of the major ones that we have is the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2011. Another one that we have is the National Counter-Terrorism Strategy, that is the NACTES 2011 also. And the Terrorism Prevention Act was what dovetailed into the NACTES policy in 2011. Then another one we have right now, and is the major policy that every government, state government, and even the federal government of Nigeria is using in countering violent extremism, is the Policy Framework and National Action Plan for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism. Is called the PCVE 2017. In this document, it has 4 major components, and that is strategic communication, I think justice and proper institutions. I can't remember categorically, but please, if you do want to know more about these documents, you can find them online. You find it on Google, you find it on government websites and a couple other places. And then the last that I also talk about is the Operation Safe Corridor, OPC, that was started in 2016. Look, the Operation Safe Corridor has generated a lot of controversy in the country. And I'm not going to sound political or sound like a government apologist or whatever. I am not. I'm just speaking purely from a realistic and probably because of some of the experiences that I've had with people in some of these places and from my own readings and understanding of how these things work. I think that the Operation Safe Corridor is one fantastic idea that the government came about with. But, you know, there's a general distrust of the Nigerian people with the Nigerian government. And it has always been like that for God knows how long. And I think it will always continue to be like that if things do not change for better. Now, the Operation Safe Corridor is one that looks towards DDR. There's something we call DDR. That is disarmament, de-radicalization and reintegration. I think I hope I'm correct. Now, the aim of the Operation Safe Corridor is to identify individuals that are not high-risk terrorists or high-risk culprits in terrorism. Now, people that are low risk, you know, in some of these, people really don't know, but take Boko Haram for example. Boko Haram is a structured organization. It has people that are mechanics. It has people that are people who work in their bakeries, people who are farmers, people who make food. It has different segments of individuals, and those people are not naturally or necessarily on the war front fighting against the Nigerian government. So the Operation Safe Corridor was created in a way whereby such low-risk individuals can be disarmed, can be de-radicalized, and can be reintegrated into the society. But like I said, there's a natural distrust between the Nigerian people and the Nigerian government. So even when you are talking about things like these people naturally do not believe that you are talking of low-risk fighters. People believe that once you are a Boko Haram fighter, you've carried gun and you've killed a Nigerian soldier and you've done havoc to people. But I can tell you categorically that The Operation Safe Corridor is targeted at low-risk fighters, people that have probably not killed a person before, but has been indoctrinated into that way of thinking, into that way of life for a number of years. Now, the Operation Safe Corridor is divided into two ways. There are people who who are high-risk fighters and are in prison. High-risk fighters that are in prison. That is one. Then you have low-risk fighters that are not in prison. That is two. Now, the high-risk fighters in prison are situated in the Kuje prison in Abuja. And what I'm expatiating on this topic, on this part of the policy options of government is majorly because I discovered it has created a lot of controversies on social media and even amongst people, and I just felt it would be nice for me to just briefly speak about it so that we have informed knowledge and we do not just argue in a very opaque way. So that's why I'm doing this. So the Operation Safe Corridor is divided into two. You have the Kuje prisons. These are people that have been sentenced probably to death or to life imprisonment or to 20 years imprisonment or whatever, but they are in prisons. Now, the purpose of this is for them to be de-radicalized even while in prison so that they can turn a new leaf and do better for themselves in there, probably learn a trade or register for WAEC or go through school while in prison. Then the low risk are for people in a camp in Gombe State. So majorly they consist of women and children and people or men that are not as high risk, low risk fighters in Boko Haram. So I'll leave it at that with that. So these are some of the policies of government and strategic options of government that has been implemented since 2011 till this moment in trying to combat some of the realities of the Nigerian state as pertaining to radicalization, violent extremism, terrorism, and whatnot. Now, I think some of the last thing I would do is to probably just keep us conscious and keep us safe in our thinkings and in our ideas of what we are facing. And I'll just give recommendations on some of the things that we should take and pay attention to. And I think one thing I will do is, the number one recommendation is this. There is a need for us to integrate traditional and critical thinking in all the things that we do. And I think this point majorly speaks to everybody, both old and young, and male and female. You need to be critical in your thinking, and you need to be traditional in your thinking also. Look, we are Africans. We are not Europeans. We are not, as much as the world is a global world, but we are still Africans. So we need to hold tight to our moral values. We need to hold tight to some of the things we've been taught as children, as youths while growing up. And then we need to be critical in our thinking also. Then another thing that I would recommend is that there is a huge need for intra and interfaith-based education. Because you are Christian does not mean that you should not try and understand the tenets of Islam. Because you are a Muslim does not mean that you should not try and understand the tenets of Christianity. Look, it wouldn't harm you. Most of the books of these religions are in English. I'm not trying to convert anybody to any religion. Please get me clear. What I'm just saying is that we are in a society that is religiously diverse, ethnically diverse, and it will do us individuals a whole lot of good to try and learn about the next person, about the next person's ethnic beliefs, about the next person's religious beliefs, so that it will foster unity, it will foster peace, it will foster harmony amongst everybody in that environment, and therefore you will have little or no recourse to fight or little or no recourse to pick up arms for a grievance or against the state or whatever. So then also you have interfaith relationship at individual levels, just like I said, as pertaining to interfaith-based education also. At individual levels, being a Muslim or being a Christian shouldn't stop us from interacting with ourselves. It shouldn't stop us from, we shouldn't demonize whatever religion the next person is doing, because this has been a very big problem for education, for radicalization in Nigeria. So there's a need for interfaith relationship at individual levels and at community levels and even at a national level. Then another thing I would recommend is personal and self-development. There's a need for us to continually develop ourselves. There's a need for us to every day, every minute, every time, continually develop yourselves, because look, anybody can fall prey. I've read about students who fall prey of radicalization in universities. Bayero University to be precise. People got radicalized, people got indoctrinated, BUK, ABU Zaria, some of these other universities in some of these. So there's a need for constant and personal development so that you know what you believe in, you understand what you believe in, and you stand by what you believe in. So then another thing is I would like to recommend that we abstain and stay away from narcotics and opioids. Like I said, it's a very big problem in the country, and there is a need for the youth of today to stay away from drugs. Please don't do drugs. If you smoke, please, well, I can only just advise. Drugs, opioids, tramadol, codeine, some of these heavy substances are not so good for the human body and for the human mind. So I think the last thing I will speak about is we need to stay conscious on social media platforms. Look, there are praise everywhere. YouTube, I'm sure a lot of us understand what it means to use YouTube algorithms. Some of these things can be as dangerous as you wouldn't even know. You wouldn't search for anything and it will pop it up to you. I myself have personally been a victim of I've met people who are radical thinking on Facebook, who got chatting with me, we got talking, and eventually I discovered this person is a radical person, and I just stopped the conversation. So the point I'm just trying to make is that we need to stay conscious on social media. It's not everything that you see that you believe. There are fake news out there. There are people who want to use what you see against you, and so we need to stay conscious and we need to stay safe. And most especially, just please stay safe, stay conscious on whatever you do, and then please let us know that some of these things we have talked about today are not just in the academic sense. These things are happening day in, day out in different parts of this country. People are experiencing these things, and we don't know where we might find ourselves in the next 2 months, 3 months. You might travel somewhere and you might meet somebody. And I just hope that this little information that I've been able to share in the last few minutes will help every one of us or any one of us in situations where we are not prepared for. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I think this is where I will stop. I'm grateful for the opportunity that has been given to me by Naija Campus Forum. When I started, some people might have not joined us, and I would just briefly speak about Naija Campus Forum again. So the Naija Campus Forum is it's an online forum dedicated to Nigerian youths at higher institution level, and presently the forum has over 30 universities and 30 higher institutions, places of learnings registered or represented by their students. So and this is the second edition of the online training series. The first edition came up some few days ago, and this is the second edition. And this platform is just majorly for us to interact, network between ourselves, as students, as university students, and to also learn about several things in our society, in our environment. And I'm just grateful that I've had this opportunity to be talking to everyone that has joined. I'm so grateful, everyone that has joined over the last almost 40, 50 minutes or thereabout. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Adewale Alfred Prevail once more. And I don't know if anyone has questions, comments, whatever you want to send, please, you can drop your questions, your comments on the email account of Naija Campus Forum at naijacampusforum@gmail.com. That is Naija, Naija, campusforum@gmail.com. Or you can also reach me on my personal email at edmundkung@gmail.com. I'll come again with it. edmundkung @gmail.com. So thank you very much for your time. I'm grateful. Naija Campus Forum is for all students of higher institutions, polytechnics, colleges of educations, university, monotechnics, wherever you are from. As far as you are a student in an higher institution, Naija Campus Forum is for you. And thank you very much. See you next time.